So yeah, like you said, the participles have those consistent patterns. The active, the first letter always has the colon over
Right.
it,
Right.
and the passive always has the shurek between the
Correct.
second
Between the second and the third.
of the root letters. Yeah. And in both the masculine, or sorry, both the active and the passive, the masculine plural ends with eem. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so that helps me remember
So
that.
the difference there now is the one has the Shrek and one doesn't.
Hmm.
So you see the eam, you would now look for does it have the Shrek or not? And
Right.
that's how we would know if it was yes.
And with the
That's a good
feminine
one.
plural, uh, both the active participle and the passive participle in the feminine plural ends with oat. It's like
Oh,
a colon
mm-hmm.
vav and
Yeah.
a tav, I think.
Yes.
So
Oh,
that's how I remember those things,
that's a good one.
and then it's sort of by process of elimination
From
to get the
there,
other ones.
good one. Uh, I think if I see um like with the passive, the singular feminine ends with the it's shura, so it ends. Is that a kametz? Hey, yes. So whenever I see a kametz hey, I think feminine.
Okay, where am I on the passive participle?
Yes, the passive
Yeah, gotcha.
feminine singular
Hmm.
ends with the kametz hey.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
So it's those just those little things like remembering those things.
Hmm.
Um, and just looking for those things to kind of prompt me or remind me. I might actually, just to help me remember, go through the process of maybe printing this again and writing it out again. You know,
Yeah.
the writing helps to make it stick.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a
Okay.
really good idea. If anybody is watching this video, here is the um, the passive feminine singular participle that we were talking about. It's got the kamets
It's hey,
under the resh, and then the
last.
hay at the end.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it changes the when I think the one of the rules Dr. Hill had told us is when you have endings that you're going to add, when you're adding consonants and so on at the end, it changes the first vowel pointing in the word.
Mm,
So rather than have say a whole M on the sheen or any kind of vowel, it has the shava. So it changes the way it's pronounced. So it's not shamar or sham, anything, it's shumara in the case of the call passive participle feminine singular.
okay. And
Whereas in the masculine, because there are no endings after the resh, the commits under the sheen, it holds. So it's shamur or shamur in that case.
Okay. So, you know what? I had not picked up on what the reason for the change in vowel pointing was, but that is really helpful. So there's the kamets under the sheen,
The
and it
sheen
doesn't change to a shiva because there's nothing added after the
added at
resh.
the end. Right,
Okay, yeah,
right,
that's
right.
useful.
I vaguely remember her saying that. I hope my reasoning is right.
Well, it
Um,
it makes sense because all of the other passives have a suffix tacked on.
and so they have the Shiva
Yeah,
under the sheen. Right.
yeah, that makes sense.
So um we've got the Shomer for the call active participle um masculine singular.
Hmm.
One of the things I notice, and I don't know when the rules break, but particularly for the participle, the masculine singular doesn't have any ending. No letters or consonants are added after that third radical.
Hmm.
So that's another way to kind of identify if it's masculine first. It if it's masculine singular, it doesn't seem to have anything after the resh or
Right.
that third consonant. If I look at well, that rule doesn't apply when we get into the perfect or the imperfect. So for the participle, the masculine singular, active or passive, does not have a consonant and added to the ending.
Yeah, that's useful.
With the masculine plural, active or passive, they both end with "eem." And then we have to just study the feminine because the feminine singular active is that Shomerette.
Yes.
The plural is Shomrot. And for the passive, it's Shmura. For the feminine singular, being kept. And for the feminine plural, passive, it's Shmurot. So that's just studying and studying and trying to memorize that.
Yeah. Yeah. The pattern that I can remember for the plurals is that with the participle, the masculine plural in active and passive ends in
In
eem, and the feminine plural in both the active and the passive ends in oat.
oat. Okay,
Those are
right.
those are the consistent ones. Um,
Yes.
and it seems to me that the feminine singular in active and passive are the ones that don't have a consistent pattern.
Right. Because it's Sagol Tav for the active and it's commit hey for the pensive.
Hmm.
Okay.
Well, do you want to move over to the perfect?
Yes. All right. For the perfect, there is there are a lot of tags in the perfect. Tab endings.
Uh-huh.
So Shamor T, Shamor Ta, um, Shamart, and then for the call perfect third feminine singular, we have that commits hey again.
That's the third feminine singular, you said?
Yes, call perfect third feminine singular. So it's Shamara. I don't know if I'm saying that properly.
Right. That one.
If I find that on the flashcard.
Yeah. Shamra.
Right. And then the third masculine singular does not have an ending. So like with the participle, the singular conjugation of the call perfect third masculine does not have an ending. So it's shamar, just like we learned it in the chapter 3 vocabulary. Shamar,
Mm.
yes. Makes sense. Um,
Trying to
it
put my go ahead.
I was looking at the first common plural in the perfect. It ends with the noon Shrek.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Shamar Nu. The second masculine plural, Shamar Tem, and the second feminine plural, Shamar Ten. So
Mm-hmm.
I use the M, Tem, to say male, masculine,
Yeah, do the same thing.
and then I found some kind of cheeky way to remember that the N was for the lady. Yes.
Yeah,
Shamar 10.
I do similar things with some of the
Associations.
cards because like there's a 12-year-old who lives in
Yeah.
my brain and so you know when I see something that um I can easily make like a juvenile uh connection to remember
Right.
what's happening.
Okay.
I do that pretty quickly.
Okay. Me too. So the M for the second masculine and the N for the second feminine.
Hmm.
The perfect doesn't have a third masculine or a third feminine. It only has a third comma. Shamaru. Yes.
Hmm.
So that is something I try to remember as well. Because the imperfect has the third masculine and third feminine, but it doesn't have a third common. So there's that distinction between the perfect and imperfect.
Hmm.
Um, so I associate the final mem here with masculine. Um, anything else that you use for the perfect?
Um, well, uh, so for the second masculine singular and the second feminine singular, my my sort of juvenile way of remembering that is, so the masculine is shamata. It's got the
Uh-huh.
kmetz under the tav
The
at the
tie,
end.
right?
And the second feminine singular is
Has the
just
Shabbat
shamart. It has the unpronounced shava at the end.
at the
And
end.
so the way I distinguish between the masculine and feminine in the second person is, like, if I'm addressing somebody, it's going to have that tav at the end with a whatever that little dot in the middle is called.
Dagesh.
Is that okay? I have trouble remembering when something is a dagesh, and what the mapik is.
Me
Um,
too. Me too.
but yes, the dagesh. So if I'm addressing a single person, like, I know it's got that tav at the end with the dagesh in the middle, but the the masculine has a pronounced syllable at the end. The
Hmm.
So it's ta, and the feminine
Hmm.
doesn't have that pronounced at the end. It's just shamart. So
So,
I'm like, okay, well, if you're talking to a man, he has something that the woman doesn't have. That's
hey,
it.
okay.
Like I said, there's a 12-year-old who lives in my brain, and he
In your
came up with
brain,
that,
right?
but it works for me.
Okay.
So uh,
If I
I,
were trying to remember it, another way to look at it would be that if I'm thinking of the ah ending, and I could associate a with Adam, a man,
oh yeah,
um, with, and then the t sound for the t ending for the second feminine would just be one with and one without. So the 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 Adam is distinguished and the woman isn't.
I gotcha.
So I just thought of the A ending just to signify Adam as a man, and then
Hmm.
if I can pull that one out, then I know the other one is the second feminine.
Right, right.
All right, good stuff.
I th-
Okay.
I think the only other mnemonic device I have uh, is on the first common plural. It ends with a nu. It's got
Yes.
the noon and then the shurech. Um,
Yes.
the way I remember that that's we is that the French word for we is nous, nous. I don't I don't know if that would be helpful to anybody else, um, but I remember when I see that new, it means we.
That is so good. French. Hmm. I did not make that association. That's a good one.
Um,
Okay.
do you have any familiarity with French?
I did French in high school. Yes,
Okay.
I did. You want to move on to the imperfect?
Sounds good.
Um, I don't know, maybe because the imperfect was the most recent one, it is more like fresh in my brain. I will, I
Hmm.
think I will always remember the Aleph for that first common singular, the Aleph with the Segol under it. So Eshmore, if I see Eshmore, I'm going to know it's the first common because the
Yes.
Aleph just is so unusual.
Right.
Um, Yeah. With the first common plural, we have a noon again, like we do in the perfect, just that it starts with the noon in the imperfect, whereas the noon is part of the ending in the perfect.
Hmm. Yes.
So
And
Nishmore for we shall keep, um, it sticks in my brain too.
yes. And I use the same kind of device for that one as I do for the first common plural in the perfect.
Right.
I remember um, that that noon. It just
Yes.
it reminds me of the French new.
French. Yes. I'm making a note there too. Because I had not made that assertion. So, yeah, so I will always remember Eshmore as the first common because of the uniqueness of the Aleph with the
Hmm.
Segol. Um, when I get to the second masculine, the Tishmore, knowing that it is also the same thing for the third feminine, to be able to make those distinctions. But I like I said, if I go back to the quiz, I think the way that question was structured, it was a true or false. So the question was that it could either be translated for the or conjugated for the second masculine or the third feminine.
Hmm.
And then we know that the context will help us do the translation in a sentence. But um, I mean, at this point, if I can remember that it is Tishmore is both second masculine and third feminine conjugation
Hmm.
um, on the singular side. Yes, singular.
Right.
So call imperfect second masculine singular or call imperfect third feminine singular are both Tishmore. Um, I will always remember that the third masculine starts with a yud.
Yes. That one, the way I remember that one is um, for the third masculine singular and the third masculine plural. Uh, they both have the yod with a hirek
Okay.
underneath,
Yes,
and
but the
the way.
singular doesn't have an ending.
Okay. Um, yeah, that is a good way to distinguish between them. The way that I remember that those are both third masculine, whether it's singular or plural, is I think about if you're talking about a guy or a bunch of guys, and it's like if the guy's like, that guy, I go, yeesh, that guy, or
Yeesh.
yeesh,
Yes.
those guys.
Yes.
That's that's
Yes.
how I remember third masculine.
That's good. That's good. But here's the thing with the perfect and the imperfect with the third masculine. If it's perfect, it's shamar, just like the vocab. If it's imperfect, it starts with the yud, correct? But in both cases, they don't have any endings. So if I see the word, I look for an ending.
Yeah.
If I see the word, I'm looking for the yud. So the yud helps me like eliminate any
Yeah.
other possibilities.
That's good.
And then so if there's a yud, it's imperfect. It's masculine.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's
And
third masculine. No
right.
other masculine has the yud. So it's a third masculine, it's imperfect if it's got the yud.
Yeah.
Um,
And the third masculine, singular and plural, are the only ones we've studied that have a yod prefixed, right?
right. So if there's a yud, it's got to be a third masculine. It has no ending if it's singular, and it has the shurek if it's plural. So I almost feel like that might be next to the Eshmore, it might be the easiest of the imperfect conjugations for me to memorize.
So that,
Because you can rule out everything else by the yud, by the ending.
okay. Yeah. So the third masculine plural in the imperfect is yishmeru, right? So that one has an ending, whereas the singular doesn't. And we're used to the singular not having an ending because it's that way in the perfect.
In the perfect, yes.
Okay. The way I remember the second feminine singular is it's Tish Marie, and I imagine addressing someone named Marie. It's not it's
That's
not
a
the
good one.
strongest device, but
I like that one though.
I'll say that learning how to pronounce the words with the vowel points has made a huge difference for me in being able to remember what things what things mean and how they're supposed to be conjugated, because it's easier to tell the words apart when I know what they're supposed to sound like. It's been a slow process, but I think I'm finally getting there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the first common plural for me, again, it starts with we had said starts with the noon. So when I make it, I'm writing down the association with the noon. Um, what about the second masculine plural? Tishmaru.
That one, that's the one that's the same as something else, right? As the, is it the third? Where
No,
am
so
I?
the third masculine is Yishmaru. So the yud makes the difference. So the
Yes,
second masculine starts with the tav, whereas the third masculine starts with the yud.
yes. Okay. And okay, um, Tish Morna is the one that is the same for two things in the plural. Second
Yes.
feminine and third feminine plural are both
Right.
uh, Tish Morna.
So the teach more now for me, both of them are feminine,
Mm-hmm.
whether second person or third.
Right.
But the third has an additional way of being conjugated. Okay.
So
Teach
that's call imperfect,
one.
second or third feminine plural. So you will keep or
Yes.
they will keep.
Or they will keep, and it's gonna be based on the context.
Yeah.
But for the third feminine,
By the way, our meeting time is about to run out. So when it does, I'll just restart the meeting.
okay. For the third feminine, there is that additional note at the bottom in our text where it could end with a shava under the resh and the is that a final noon with the kametz
Oh,
under
right,
it?
right, right, right. Yeah, it's got that
Right. And
alternate.
I think again with the test, it was one of those, I think might have been a true or false or